Hello, I'm Ken White, founding editor of the National Post, and I'm here with David Frum, author of the hot-selling new book, Trumpocracy, The Corruption of the American Republic. David, wonderful to have you here.
So nice to see you again.
So you talk in the book about your own reaction to the rise of Trump.
Yes.
and how when he was seeking the Republican nomination, you saw some good in his candidacy.
Yes.
What did you see that was good, and where did it turn?
Well, the premise was, it never occurred to me that he might actually win the Republican nomination. So the way I felt about him was that he was someone who was going to throw open the windows in what had become a stagnant party. When Trump declared in June of 2015, Jeb Bush was leading the polls. Everyone assumed that either he or somebody very like him would be the nominee of the party, and they would campaign on the Mitt Romney platform of 2012, big tax cuts, big cuts in healthcare spending, but that they would amend it by having a much more open immigration policy. And I thought this was just bad policy and bad politics. Donald Trump, I mean, look, you got Trump, but along with Trump, you got a discussion of health, the need to have a more generous approach to healthcare at a time of, the recovery from this terrible recession, that middle-class economics had to take priority over tax cuts at the high end. Trump used the word opioids and drugs. He didn't use the word opioids. He talked about drugs when no one else was doing it, and he was an indication and a warning that some new approach was needed on immigration. So what I assumed would happen would be that Trump would introduce these themes. I knew the Republican base would resonate to the themes, because I'd been writing about that a lot. And then some responsible person, seeing that this was working, would steal his ideas and then do something with them. Some Scott Walker figure, somebody like that, Ted Cruz even, and then run a campaign using Trump ideas, but without Trump's toxic personality.
Right. So that didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
And you got Trump. And you had some serious misgivings about Trump as a leader.
Well, look, anyone who'd followed his business career, and I knew a little bit about it from having lived in New York in the 1990s, from knowing a little bit about the Toronto real estate market and the shameful story of the Trump Tower here and its abuse of its investors. You just knew what he was. And it was from the very beginning that his improper connections with Russia were obvious. And I knew in 2015 that the Russians were supporting candidates like Trump all over Western Europe. And I'd been writing about that with horror, and now it had come to the United States.
You became one of the leading critics in Washington of the Trump candidacy. For 25 years now, you've been in D.C. as a pundit, as an author. And you've been aligned generally with conservatism and with the Republican Party, and suddenly you're a big thorn in the side of the Republican Party and the new Republican administration. What was it like for you personally in those circumstances?
Well, I've been in this situation once or twice before. This time it's different, partly because I'm used to it, and partly because this time there are a lot of people who are in a similar situation, in their cases for the first time. So many Republicans who've been much more orthodox over the last 15 years than I've been were even more horrified than I am by Donald Trump, and they didn't have a language or a way of processing it. So one of the things I've tried to do is to say, look, I've been through this. Not getting invited to the White House Hanukkah party is not the worst thing that can ever happen to you, and that you have to find some way of working together. And so I've been talking to other people in the conservative world to try to think about, what does republicanism, conservatism look like after Trump? How do we, because he's taking American conservatism on a path to the French National Front. If it's up to him, that's what it's going to be. If it's up to the
and what's there?
What's there is a party that is just a party of ethnocultural chauvinism, white nationalism, but joined to super statist and dysfunctional and corrupt economics. On the other hand, if you let the congressional Republican leadership have their way, which they have had since 2009, you're going to have a party of the monopoly man, completely unelectable in any Democratic franchise. It's going to be all top hats and striped pants and monocles. And Trump is the product of their failure. This idea that it's not a two-sided contest where you have the so-called moderates against Trump. What you really have are out-of-touch plutocrats enabling this chauvinist And if you're going to have a workable, electable, decent conservative politics, a third way has to be found.
You're very hard on elites, America's elites, in this book. You say that Donald Trump did not create the vulnerabilities he exploited. They awaited him. The irresponsibility of American elites, the arrogance of party leaders, the insularity of the wealthy, and those who had those and more were the resources that Trump used on his way to power. Why are the elites more culpable than, say, the American people who voted him into office?
Well, I speak with love because my view of politics is elites are inevitable. Politics is inherently and inescapably, in any system, democratic or not, an elite game, because there are some few people who, for reasons of interest or resources, will take a large part, and most people will take a less interested part. So that's just, so I start with the presumption. They're sort of, elites are the drivers of politics. And when they do a good job, they gain a lot of consent. I mean, as you saw in the years from 1945 to 1980. And the job of elites is to refine choices so that voters can make meaningful democratic decisions. So, abortion, legal, illegal. It's hard to finesse that question. So you have to have an intelligent, responsible debate without violence, without conspiracy theories, in a way that sharpens the question, in a way that ultimately people can say one way or the other. What has happened in the United States and throughout the developed world to a lesser extent, especially in Europe, has been that as elites have drifted away, they've made democratic choice less meaningful, and they have thought much more about themselves than the much more public-spirited elites that governed these countries after World War II.
What of the many things that Trump has done wrong since he got to office is the most dangerous thing that he's done?
The most dangerous is his attack on American world leadership. Think about this from the point of view of a South Korean, that Donald Trump tells you all the time that if you want security from against North Korean nuclear missiles, it's China, not America, that can provide it. Meanwhile, America is attacking the trade deals that South Korea depends on, a U.S.-South Korea trade agreement, and is making it pretty clear how he does not regard the potential of loss of life in the Korean peninsula as anything much to worry about. So you have to think, I don't love China. I mean, South Korea is democratic, China is not. Historical friction between the nationalisms of the two countries and two nations. But if we need security, we need somebody else to provide it, and China's offering it, America's not. You see that happening in Europe. If you're German, you have to think the same way. Or the small countries of East Central Europe. Donald Trump won't even defend the United States against Russian cyber aggression. How safe can Estonia feel? And they all have to wonder, we need a new protector. The whole system of global security built over the past three-quarters of a century is dissolving.
Right. Your friends who have remained loyal to the Republican Party, how do they defend their loyalty to Trump, and how would you, if you had to say something good about Trump and the Trump administration, what would you identify as the best thing he's done?
Well, what I would say, the one good thing I would say about Donald Trump as a human being is that he's not a hypocrite. He does not pretend to be a good man, a good husband, a good father. He doesn't pretend to be kind or considerate. He is what the public face of Trump is the private face of Trump.
Certain integrity there.
He has a certain consistency. That's one of the things that is so amazing about his evangelical support. He doesn't try to fool them. The story he told most often on the campaign trail ended with the punchline, "You knew I was a snake when you took me in." And so they do. The biggest accomplishment is, I think, the reduction in illegal border crossings. That is not something that Trump did, but in reaction to perceptions of what he might do, there has been a substantial drop, maybe as much as half, in illegal crossings of the southern border. So that's welcome. Those who support Trump in the Republican world fall into two groups. A small group who actually believe in him, and a larger group who, one way or another, think they can use him. And the people who think they can use him are endlessly disappointed because he's wilier than they think he is. And the small group of true believers, I think, are attracted above all by Trump's personality. They are attracted by dominance. We like to think that human beings are repelled by cruelty, but the Romans put bums in seats of the Roman Colosseum every other day for 400 years, knowing that people will come to see gladiators hack themselves to pieces. And Donald Trump appeals to that in people.
David, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.